Hello, everybody. This is Rick Manning, Americans for Limited Government. I had the big debate last night, and the big winners were Donald Trump and Tucker Carlson, Elon Musk, and the entire platform, the streaming platforms. Big winners for a very simple reason. Winner. Here's why. Donald Trump said, I don't need to stand on a stage with a bunch of people with 1% support or less and get chirped at all night. And I don't have to do that. And he went on counter programming with Tucker Carlson, and over 154 million people viewed that counter programming. 154 million people viewed that counter programming. That's amazing. Now, the views can be very short, but that is a massive number. Joe Biden was tallied with 82 million votes were counted for Joe Biden. It's almost the double. The views are almost double the number of votes that were counted for Joe Biden. That's incredible. That's why Donald Trump said, I don't need to be on that stage. I need to give my story individually and be able to talk in a conversation about the problems that are facing this country, which is what he did. Now, the estimates on the Fox News viewership were much higher than I thought they would be. They were about 50 million, was the guess of people watched it at some point through the hour and a half that it was on. And that's a huge number for Fox. So that's not it's a good number for Fox and a one-time deal. But those 6 candidates who were up there, I guess it was 6 or 8 candidates who were up there, were splitting that time. And so they each some were getting, basically 10 minutes max. And exposed to a small portion of that, whereas Donald Trump had 150 million people watching him and Tucker. So what do you take away from this? Well, the fact of the matter is, what we're seeing is a transformation. First of all, I'm going to show you part of the Trump interview, because I think it's important, and it's the end of the interview, which many people may not have stayed all the way to the end. But Trump is very well, almost, he's talking, you get the sense that maybe this guy's been president before. It's really introspective in some respects, but watch this.
So last question, if you're elected president again, what's your number one priority? When you ran last time, you said, I will build a wall. This time, your bottom line.
So you can do numerous things at the same time.
Of course.
But let's say number one is a border, and taking hundreds of thousands of criminals that have been allowed into our country and getting them out and bringing them back to their country, Guatemala. By the way, not only the 4 countries that we think of as neighbors, all over the world. Last month, we had 149 countries represented. Think of it. We had 149 countries represented, Tucker, from places that many people never even heard of, coming into our country. And they're coming in from mental institutions, and they're coming in from prisons. They're emptying out their prisons all over South America. They're emptying out their mental institutions. Terrorists are pouring into our country. We have no idea. I had the strongest border in the history of our country, and I built almost 500 miles of wall. They like to say, oh, was it less? No, I built 500 miles. In fact, if you check with the authorities on the border, we built almost 500 miles of wall. And I had another 200 that I was going to build. It's like water, it seeks. And we're going to build another 200. We built it. It was all set to go. All they had to do was install it. It would have taken 3 weeks. And that's when I found out. I said, I think these people actually want open borders. The first thing I would do would be I would seal up the border good and tight, except for people that want to come and legally.
Do you think we're moving towards civil war?
There's tremendous passion and there's tremendous love. You know, January 6th was a very interesting day because they don't report it properly. I believe it was the largest crowd I've ever spoken before. And you know some of the crowds I've spoken before. And like July 4th on the mall, I think they had 1 million people there. But I think that the biggest crowd I've ever spoken before was on January 6th. And people that were in that crowd, a very, very small group of people, and we said patriotically and peacefully, peacefully and patriotically, right? Nobody ever says that. Go peacefully and patriotically. But people that were in that crowd that day, very small group of people went down there, and then there are a lot of scenarios that we can talk about. But people in that crowd said it was the most beautiful day they've ever experienced. There was love in that crowd. There was love and unity. I have never seen such spirit and such passion and such love. And I've also never seen simultaneously and from the same people such hatred of what they've done to our country.
So do you think it's possible that there's open conflict? We seem to be moving towards something.
I don't know, because I don't know what it, you know, I can say this. There's a level of passion that I've never seen. There's a level of hatred that I've never seen, and that's probably a bad combination.
Donald Trump, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very much.
Thank you.
That is a bad combination, by the way.
Bad combination. Thank you.
Wow. It's a, you know, it's interesting because the Fox News chose to open their broadcast with these talking about the song that deals with dislocation and despair. That's Richmond, north of Richmond, and it's a song that they played right before asking the first question. At least played part of it, and it's a song that we're seeing something happening in America, and people here in D.C. need to figure this out, because there is this is different. This is different. In the 60s, you had Woody Guthrie and Bob Dylan and others who were really folk musicians, where you could understand the lyrics, but they're writing protest songs that really touched on what a lot of people were thinking, and people were inspired by those folk songs, whether you agreed with the sentiment or not. The fact of the matter is, that's what you're seeing now with with what's happening. Is you're seeing songs like Richmond, north of Richmond, taking off, and the bottom line on it is, I'm trying to pull up the actual lyrics here for you, because it actually does in fact hit on some very simple themes. And if Google would just give me the darn lyrics, it would be really easy. Lyrics, here we go. Okay. So here's what I'm gonna just put the lyrics up for you, because it's, I think we've all heard this song, or at least at some level, but I think it's important that we take a look at what these lyrics and what they entail, because this is the heart of what we're looking at, is not being able to see stuff on the internet anymore because of ad blockers. I'm just gonna end this. Bottom line is, I'm going to go to what I was going to say. Bottom line is, we have a spirit that's happening in this country, a spirit that says we're paying too much. The people in Washington don't care about us. It is similar to what happened in the Tea Party in 2010, but it's beyond what happened in the Tea Party in 2010. It's similar to what happened with Donald Trump's election in 2016, but it's bigger than what's happened to Donald Trump's election in 2016 because there's more of a consensus now that it's true. There's more of a consensus that Washington, D.C. and the elites in this country are so far out of touch that all they care about is Biff and Muffy being able to take the next trip to wherever they're going and do that. And they don't give a darn about Bobby Jean and Billy Bob. You know, and back when I was NRA lobbyist, long time ago, I used to always say, you know, the battle is between, you know, Buffy and, you know, Biff and Muffy want to take away, you know, Billy Bob's gun. And they want to take, it's a battle, it's a culture battle. We've seen a culture war in this country that has been engaged by the left for so long. And finally, what's happening is people are saying enough is enough. I've had enough. You saw in the Jason Aldean song where he said, not in a small town. It's where it basically said, you can't get away with rioting and burning down our buildings and disobeying and spitting on cops and all that stuff. You can't get away with that in a small town, in middle America, in the flyover country. You might be able to pull that in the big cities on the coast. But you can't get away with it in the part of the country you ignore and you despise, the flyover country. That is true. Jason Aldean's song went to #1. Oliver Anthony's song, Richmond, North of Richmond, went to #1. Anthony had no record contract. His song took off as a viral video. A viral video. The ultimate democracy, where people said, this is something I want to share. This is something I think other people need to hear. He didn't have a record contract. When the record companies approached him, wanted to give him a record contract, John Rich, who's got another song, I got a song up right now that's going up the charts pretty aggressively, that just came out. He said, if he'd been with a record label, he never would have been allowed to make that song. The establishment is being rejected left and right. And that's what we really saw with this Tucker Trump versus the Fox News debate. The establishment says, okay, here are the rules of how you're going to talk about this, and we're going to set up the rules, and we're going to do what we want to do. And Tucker, who got fired by Fox, said, well, I've got this other platform over here that Elon Musk bought, where they're going to let us talk about whatever comes to mind. And I'm going to have Donald Trump on, and we're going to tape it in 45 minutes, and we're going to just talk about issues, and we're going to talk about what's going on in the world. We're going to have a conversation. And as a result of the alternative media available, 156 million people saw some portion of that conversation. Elon Musk, on the X, it's called now, said on a tweet that's pinned to the debate, to Tucker Carlson's post on the debate, said, interesting to hear things directly versus through the media filter. Yeah, that's what new media does for you. It allows you to hear the entire unfettered conversation. So you can make your own choices. You don't need somebody to interpret it for you. So that's the change. The power brokers in Washington, D.C. are scared to death because they no longer control what you see and what you hear. That's why it is so darn hard to get Congress to pass legislation that Senator Rand Paul has introduced that stops the censorship by the federal government. Because a lot of people on both sides of the aisle really don't like the idea. They really don't like the idea of you having unrestricted capacity to find out facts and not just have to rely on the facts that they provide you. They don't like the fact that you can go tune in and see a Donald Trump say to the Republican National Committee, dudes, I don't need you. I'm not going to play by your rules. They don't like that. And you know what? They don't like it because it takes the control out of their hands. The Republican consultants don't like it because it takes the narrow pathway to get to the nomination, to get to the presidency. It expands the pathway. Dirty little secret is more people are registered now as independents than are registered as Democrats or Republicans. More people have, more people still are registered Republican or Democrat, but a majority of plurality, there are more people who are independents than are Democrats, and there's more people who are independents than are Republicans. About 40% of the people reject either party because they've got this sneaking suspicion that the party doesn't represent them, that no party represents them. The party represents the party's interests. I am a former executive vice president of California College Republicans. I worked my way through school at the University of Southern California, doing conservative politics, and Republican campaigns as part of the jobs I did working my way through school. It is and what we've seen is two major developments. Number one, the party structures are falling apart. People on the left and the people on the right will tell you that. Party structures are falling apart. Why? Because party structures are pass-throughs for big donors to do basic communications communications and basically TV. They don't actually perform the function they used to perform in terms of organizing people, getting people together, doing get out the vote, going in, do voter registration, doing the things, the nuts and bolts of party building. They don't do that anymore. There's no money in it. The money's in TV advertising or in online advertising. Anything there's a commission in, there's money in. So the parties don't spend their time and money organizing people. It's on both sides. And so they're falling apart. Secondly, the people don't really care what the Republican Party says, and they don't really care what the Democrat Party says. They've heard it before. They know the talking points. They already know the talking points. They don't need to hear the talking points again. So they don't care. They want to hear what the candidates have to say. They want to hear what directly from the horse's mouth. And in the case of this election, there's one horse that matters in this primary. It's Donald Trump. And Donald Trump said to the RNC, by not going to that debate stage, he said, "You need me more than I need you." And he proved it through the 156 million or so that saw some portion of that Twitter stream, of that X stream. It is that's astonishing. There's only 220 million adults in America. In the last election, about 156 million voted for the president, at least in the two top candidates. So as many people viewed that as the entire number of people who voted in the last presidential election, for one of the two major party candidates. That's astonishing. It's a disaster for Fox. Now, Fox had a good night. 50 million is a good night. But the fact of the matter is, the message is very clear. I don't have to go on Fox to get my message across. I can go on Joe Rogan. I can go on with Tucker Carlson for an interview. I can go on with Dan Bongino, do an interview. There's lots of people with massive followings who are not on Fox, where people can easily look at the communication. Hard questions get asked, and so there's massive opportunity for people who are not vetted and approved by somebody at a major media company. Same holds true on the left. You know, Robert Kennedy Jr. is not a phenomenon because of what's happening, him getting on MSNBC and the like. He's got a following because he's on non-alternative networks on the web through streaming. That's your change. That's a change. It's a change in control and power. And ironically, it's a change in control of power that the left and the government have been very much aware of and have been very fearful of, which is why we had the government and the left go in cahoots to just debunk the Hunter Biden laptop story in 2020. They didn't want people to know it. And it wasn't enough just to get people, the news media not to report it. They also need to shutter it in terms of being on Facebook and being on Twitter and being on YouTube and being on Google, any Google searches. They need to shutter that, the direct way for you to find out what's true. And they did. Something's happening in America, folks. Donald Trump touches on it in the ending of his meeting with Tucker Carlson. People like me are very proud of our country. People like you are very proud of our country. Yeah, I'm really pissed about what's happening to it, about what's being done to it. And it's why we come on here is to inform you what's going on and give you means to do something about it. That's one of the things that we try to do, is equip you to do something about it, because there's nothing more dangerous than people who don't believe that there's anything they can do about something, who believe that they have to do something about it. I think Tucker Carlson recognizes that. I think Donald Trump recognizes that. And recognizing that exists is not condoning violence in any way, shape, or form. It's merely recognizing that it exists. And fortunately, there's an outlet. And you can go back in the thing and you can watch the GOP debate. And, you might like Vivek Ramaswamy, you might like, any number of the people who were up there, Ron DeSantis. But the fact of the matter is, I'm going to show you one thing from the debate, and it gives you, I think it gives you a good sense of what's happening here. This is the critical part of the debate, the only part that matters to me. Here you go.
But we are going to take a brief moment and talk about the elephant not in the room.
Former President Trump has been indicted in 4 different states on 91 counts. He will be processed tomorrow in Georgia at the Fulton County Jail for charges relating to the 2020 election loss.
You all signed a pledge to support the eventual Republican nominee. If former President Trump is convicted in a court of law, would you still support him as your party's choice? Please raise your hand if you would.
Okay, right there. I'm going to move back just a second. I want you to just watch Ron DeSantis.
You would.
Okay. He looks to see what Mike Pence is doing and what Chris Christie's doing, mainly Mike Pence. He looks over, he sees Vivek Ramaswamy with his hand high in the air. Nikki Haley, her hand up like she's taking an oath, which she did in terms of saying she'd support. Tim Scott with his hand raised. You've got Doug Burgum, the governor of North Dakota, with his hand raised. To Pence's or to DeSantis's right, you have Mike Pence, who hasn't raised his hand yet, but will. You got Chris Christie, who kind of waves his hand around, and and makes a speech. And you have Asa Hutchinson, who nobody really cares what he thinks. But so now watch. So, but just watch. I mean, I'm going to show you this again because seeing Ron DeSantis try to figure out what he's going to do on the spot. Apparently, he wasn't prepared for this question. It was the only question I thought that mattered in this whole debate. But let's just watch him again.
And if you would.
Okay, you see Ramaswamy's hand goes up immediately. You have Nikki Haley's hand and Tim Scott's hand and Doug Burgum's hand go up about a half a second later. And you have Ron DeSantis looking over and saying, okay, Ramaswamy, he's put his hand up. Yeah, he's putting the hand up. And with an unenthusiastic, little tepid hand up by DeSantis. And Ramaswamy keeps his hand in the air the entire time. I'm going to just say something here. This is just, I'm just going to leave this picture up because I want you to understand something. None of these people are winning the presidency if Donald Trump, for some reason, is not the candidate. Okay? And there's a lot of reasons why that could occur. But if for some reason Donald Trump is not the nominee, there's only one of these people who are on there who people who support Donald Trump can look and say, this guy supports Donald Trump. Only one of them. He's the guy with his hand still in the air. Proudly having his hand in the air. First hand in the air, last hand down. Out of all these professional politicians, and all 7 of these people whose hands are down at this moment, they're professional politicians. The one guy who's not a professional politician understands that the only way you can win is with Trump supporters. I'm going to repeat that. The only way a Republican can beat Joe Biden or any other Democrat is with Trump supporters. They cannot win without Trump supporters. There's no way to win without Trump supporters. And these 7 dwarves apparently can't figure that out. So they sit there, and we always hear from the smart people. Well, Donald Trump can't win. We need somebody who can win. Well, the only one who's smart enough to figure out that they couldn't win without Donald Trump supporters is Vivek Ramaswamy, the non-politician. And you know why? Because he didn't spend all his time in Washington, D.C. He didn't spend all his time, talking to a bunch of political people and putting their finger in the air and trying to figure out what's going on. Because he's a guy who's been on the outside. He's been fighting against the woke agenda on investment. But he's not a DC insider. So he knows, even if he doesn't like Donald Trump, and I don't know if he likes Donald Trump or doesn't like Donald Trump. What I do know is he understands that he cannot win without Donald Trump supporters. And that this is a crucible time. They're never going to get another chance to do this. And all 7, well, let's put it this way. Nikki Haley got it right. Tim Scott got it right. Doug Burgum got it right. Ron DeSantis couldn't figure out what was right. Mike Pence was apparently caught off guard, and he wasn't sure what was right. Chris Christie then goes off and says he doesn't support Donald Trump. And Asa Hutchinson is essentially an inert object. Ron DeSantis is the guy who should be Trump's #1 supporter in terms of and protector. Because Ron DeSantis claims to run on the Trump agenda, but he's younger and can do it better and that kind of stuff, right? And yet, he couldn't figure out if he would support Donald Trump if he was a nominee, if he was convicted. Knowing these charges are just bogus BS, he couldn't figure that out. He didn't know in advance what the answer to that question was. He had to look around, see what other people were saying before he do it. It's not a leader. I like Ron DeSantis. Some friends who work for Ron DeSantis. He's doing some great stuff down in Florida. He really is. He's doing some great stuff down in Florida. But my goodness, what a disappointment. The only guy who could figure it out was a non-politician. The only guy. And that's why they opened this debate by asking a question about the song Rich Men North of Richmond. Because Fox News knows that there's a sentiment going on out there that they don't trust anybody in politics. And this question emphasized that point. And I can't tell you, Nikki Haley did raise her hand about a second later than Ramaswamy. Kim Scott, the same. Doug Burgum, the same. But there was only one who's smiling. There's only one who's enthusiastic. Everybody else is somber and doesn't like it. And Ramaswamy said, yeah, I'm raising my hand. I mean, I don't know a lot about him. I know I've heard him talk. I like what he says. But when the only guy who can figure out what the politics are is a non-politician, it tells you why the public, the people, think that Washington, D.C. is out of touch and doesn't understand what's really going on. And the Washington, D.C. consultants are going to spend millions upon millions of dollars trying to figure out, how do we get the Trump voter? And they'll come up with some simplistic stuff, and they won't understand that there's something going on here. It's not philosophical. At least not in a traditional conservative liberal sense. It is whether or not your own government is on your side, or is it doing something else? Whose interests are being served? And a lot of Americans are saying, not mine. And those Americans are white, they're Black, they're Hispanic, and they're Asian. You don't have to go to San Antonio and eat a Mexican meal to reach out to Hispanics. I use that because Gerald Ford famously did that in the '76 election. And it struck me, it's the first time I ever noticed that kind of politics. I was like, that's how he's campaigning in the Hispanic community? He's going and eating a taco? I mean, what are they doing? But that was me when I was a young man, just seeing them do that for the first time and just being amazed. That's not what you do. Americans are Americans. And we have a responsibility to recognize that. And our politicians have a responsibility to figure that out. And there's a common theme. If the government isn't for you, then it's against you. The government won't leave you alone. They're trying to tell you what to do. When the government wants to make it so your little girl has to dress in a locker room with boys, with men, then there's something wrong in this country. When you have inflation going up, you can't afford a house. When you've got when it doesn't make sense to follow the law, because those who don't follow the law benefit. When you see things happening in California, where you have people going into stores and just robbing the stores blind, and the stores are going out of business, making it so the people who live there who did nothing wrong or deprived the ability to go to those stores, they don't have a grocery store to go at 11 o'clock at night because the grocery store isn't open. They don't have a pharmacy to go to at 11 o'clock at night because the pharmacy had to close down because it couldn't stay open because of the thefts by the thugs who the left would not prosecute, or the government would not enforce the law against. When you see that, you say, something's wrong. The government's against me. Why isn't the government protecting me? I'm the law-abiding citizen. And that's what we're seeing coming across in the culture. That's what we're seeing coming across from these songs. It's very simple. People want to be left alone. They want common sense laws to be enforced. And they want to be able to have a job and be able to afford groceries and be able to take a vacation and be able to buy a house and kind of just and live the American dream. They want to be able to take their kids to the Little League game and know that it's going to be safe at the Little League game, that the gangs aren't going to overrun the thing. They want to be able to live a life that is a virtuous one, where you have fun, where you maybe do a little bit of good in the world and leave the world a better place than you found it, and your children have a chance to prosper beyond what you did. That's what they want. And somehow, our politicians in Washington, D.C., and the people who spend all the time trying to figure out how to manipulate voters to vote for their candidates and how to try to write legislation so it makes it look like they're doing something when they really aren't. They can't figure it out. Top of the Billboard chart is a guy who wasn't even part of a record label, writing a protest song. If they don't get it from that, I don't know how they're going to get it. And the one person we know who does get it is the one guy who wasn't on that stage. The guy who had 156 million views on Twitter or X. Some of you gets it is Elon Musk, who says we're going to open our platform up and we're not going to censor people. There's still some problems, okay, let's be honest, but it's at least open to this kind of forum. People get it as Tucker Carlson, who lost his job because he kept reporting on things that Fox News didn't want him to report on. The establishment's in trouble because the people have found a way to get around it. And the people are saying to the establishment, you no longer get to dictate to me what's going to happen in my life. Because the establishment has failed is one thing it had to do, was to protect the interests of the common person. That's what it had to do. And when you have veteran homeless on the streets, and we spend billions upon billions upon billions of dollars every single month sending more money to Ukraine, that's a problem. When you have illegal aliens pouring across our border, being given all sorts of money and subsidies, and you have homeless veterans on the streets, that's a problem. When people are living you have mass homelessness in California and elsewhere, with all the drug addiction and the deaths, that's a problem. We have 100,000 people dying of fentanyl poisoning every single year and going up because we have no clothes, because our borders are wide open. That's a problem. And when our little girls can't go to high school, can't change clothes in a high school gym without fear of having a boy coming in there claiming to be a girl. We can't protect our little girls from predators because we choose not to. That's a problem. Folks, I'm going to go to the, and that is why 156 million people went and watched Donald Trump, and about a third that many saw the official debate. If you'd like to do a subscribe to Americans for Limited Government, please do that. You can see it at the top here of the chat. I've got a lot of quotes here, and most of them are, there's one thing I want to, I really meant to hit on this. I got sidetracked a little bit. Debbie Marie, thank you. I really would encourage you, if you have not watched the interview throughout, I think would encourage you to do so. It's not Donald Trump on the stump. It's not Donald Trump. He says some things about some of his opponents that are, he's Donald Trump. But the bottom line is having a discussion about issues. He's a guy who in 2016, his biggest liability was he knew kind of what the issues were, but he didn't know he didn't have depth of knowledge on most of them. He was president for 4 years. He's a very smart guy. He knows what's going on. He has a depth of knowledge of the problems now, and he's got a better idea of the tools that can be used to solve them. And so the conversation with Tucker is different because it's a conversation, and in that conversation, you're getting more of a much more of the insight of how the man actually works. And I would encourage you to watch it because Donald Trump's a whole lot more than the bombastic guy on the stump. There's a lot more depth there. And I found that to be, I've said for a long time that the only person who can stop Donald Trump from being president is Donald Trump. And because if Donald Trump comes across as presidential, Donald Trump wins. If Donald Trump comes across as a bombastic ass, he loses. That's why that Tucker interview is so important. So I'd encourage people. It's 46 minutes, and it's worth your time. You learn a lot more about the man, and you get a sense of. It's really like you're sitting in a chair, out kind of off, just off at the bar while they're talking between themselves, and you get a good sense of the kind of that conversation that occurs, and kind of the internal thoughtfulness and the concerns that Trump really has. And so I just, it's really worth listening to the conversation because I think you get a lot more depth about the man than you would ever get in a chirp fest where people are calling each other names and debating what size hands people have in a debate. And so that's to me, one of those it's one of the opportunities you get because, as Elon Musk says, you get to see the whole thing and hear it directly from somebody in an open forum. So that to me, Debbie, thank you for reminding me of that. I wanted to talk about how Donald Trump was very presidential and very knowledgeable on the issues. And because I got ramped up on some other things, I kind of missed it. So thank you for reminding me. Yeah, Valerie, I think it is. I don't believe it's up on other platforms. But yeah, if you go to Twitter and you go to Tucker Carlson, it is the top post pinned by Tucker Carlson, and you can see it right there, and you can expand it out to fit your whole screen. So it's really no different from watching it than it is on YouTube. It's just you're finding it on Twitter. So go to Twitter. Donald Trump does not have a account on Twitter, or X as it's now called. But it is, I think, really significant. So that's where I would go to see it. It may be elsewhere. I just don't know that. I just don't know. So somebody else wants to chime in on the chat and tell me different, I'll look it up. You don't want to attempt to find what we call Billy Bob. Valerie, I spent 9 years as an NRA lobbyist trying to explain that to people. That's by the way, a little side note, I've said this before, but we don't always have the same audience. Chris Christie started his political career trying to run for U.S. State Senate in New Jersey. And he was trying to run in a primary against a guy named, anyway, he was running for against the guy who was Senate Minority Leader at the time. And his idea was John Dorsey. Because John Dorsey supported or opposed the confiscation of semi-automatic firearms. He was going to start his political career as a Republican, running against a Republican on the issue of we should ban semi-automatic firearms. Well, fortunately for Chris Christie's career, he was so incompetent he couldn't get the signatures to get on the ballot, so that campaign never took off. But let me tell you, people like me don't forget that stuff. And so, he's got a lot of strikes against him, and it wouldn't break my heart if he paid a huge price and found himself so deeply buried in the polls that he couldn't raise money. Let's see here. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Donald Trump Jr., and Matt Walsh were not allowed in the green room during the debate. Wrong. Well, I have to tell you that since Donald Trump wasn't there, you have a reasonable expectation that you shouldn't have. The RNC was probably right in not allowing non-representatives of non-participants to be part of the media scrum. I mean, that is that's one of the downsides of making that decision. You reward those who attended, and it wouldn't have been fair to those who attended if they had allowed Donald Trump surrogates to be part of the scrum. So, which is what it's called, because at the end, how it works is you got the media all there, and then you have spokespeople for each one of the candidates. They go and they talk to the media, and they try to spin the media to say, my guy won, my person won, Nikki Haley won, whoever won, okay? And so they try to get and generate stories about what a great debate performance the person they're supporting did. And so that's and that's just part of the process. And it's pretty competitive. And so the RNC made the decision, if you're not participating in the debate, then we're not going to allow you to have a representative in that process. And truthfully, I would have made the same decision. So it's once again, their ball. They get to play with it however they want. The irony is they're the big loser out of this, because Donald Trump showed that he doesn't need them. They need him. And I think that lesson has been delivered loud and clear. Yeah, I mean, you're right. The number's been updated, and it's astronomical. There's only 225 million adults in this country. Only 160 million or so have jobs in this country. We're talking about 200 million, and recognize they may not see the whole thing. They may have seen a small portion, but 200 million is basically everybody in the country. That's astonishing. That's astonishing. And it shows the power of an open platform that Elon Musk has a vision to provide, a journalist who's had the courage to stand up against the establishment, who was able to interview the single most compelling person in politics since Ronald Reagan. And that is ratings gold. But more importantly, that is the power of the new media. And it's what makes people who are invested in cable or even broadcast like Disney shake in their boots. It's why Disney's announced they want to sell ABC. They want to sell ABC because it's not the future. And it is and so as we find this, it's why we spend, truthfully, it's just be honest, it's why Americans for Limited Government, I made a decision that we're going to spend a lot of time, every day we're going to do streaming. And, we don't have millions of people watching, but the objective is to grow it. The objective is to get reach. The objective is to ask those who like the content to subscribe, help us pay for this, but also to share it with their friends, make it part of their routine in terms of sharing it with people who would enjoy it, would find it interesting. Because this medium that we're dealing with right here, that you and I are now enjoying, is the future. I may not like it. I mean, there's a lot of things I don't like about it, but the fact of the matter is that's the truth. And if you're going to invest your time and energy in trying to influence the course of our country in the future, you darn well better be on a platform that people use and that engage in. And that's why Donald Trump made the visionary choice to be with Tucker and the Seven Dwarves plus Ramaswamy made a choice to be on a cable network, and in a world where cutting the cord has become a phrase that everybody knows what you're talking about. It has nothing to do with babies. That's, a dying industry and a growing industry. And Donald Trump chose to put his brand on the growing industry and tell his story in the growing industry. That's if you want to just get down to it, that is the biggest story out of this debate, is the 200 million people. Thank you for the update. The 200 million people who saw Donald Trump versus the estimate of 50 million, which is very hard to believe, but that's because that's a huge number. And that's a huge success, and every other context, it's a huge success. But it's minuscule. It's quarter of the people who saw Donald Trump. Pick a medium, and if you can dominate that medium, you can win. Please share this. I really hope that you will. We try to be thoughtful in these things and provide some interest in some ideas that are a little more than just what you'd read on the comment, kind of in the regular world. Anybody can watch these things and have an opinion on it. I don't need to tell you what's in those things. I try to analyze what it means and why it means it, and who wins and who loses in that respect. And I'm just going to read this one. I don't know what Melissa said. Melissa, thank you for commenting. Most registered independent voters are conservative leaning because the left has completely lost their minds. Then there's people like me who just feel we don't need a party. We can think for ourselves. Melissa, thank you for sharing. That is, you represent the independent voters exactly right. The danger of that is the parties do control the voting process, the primary process in many of the states. And as a result, independent voters are shut out of the initial decision as to who are going to be the two major candidates. I anticipate that sometime in the not too distant future, we're going to see an election where an independent candidate is going to be really appealing to independent voters and will get more votes than at least one, if not both, of the major party candidates. We're getting pretty close to that point in this country. It just costs a lot of money and a lot of organization to do that. But that is, I think we're getting close to that, the breaking point where the parties themselves lose even more relevance as people choose to be independent, but also want to have a choice in terms of picking who gets to be on the ballot, rather than choosing somebody between other people's bad choices, which is how they might feel about it. Melissa, thank you very much for commenting. I'm going to go here to Anna Stewart. Trust is a big factor when it comes. Why didn't that work? Trust is a big factor when it comes to these politicians. They aren't honest with the American people. Our government has gone to hell. So they say one thing and do another. Yeah, Anna, you're right. Let me just go off of that. Once again, we have a number of things we're doing. Right now, we are actively have a paid campaign on the web trying to get people to contact Congress to impeach Joe Biden. That's something, if you're interested in participating, we would really appreciate you going to getliberty.org. It's getliberty.org, which is our website. Click the button that says impeach Biden, and send a note to your House member and 2 senators, urging them to impeach Biden. That's important. Kevin McCarthy's kind of doing this on it, and he needs to hear from people, and he needs to hear from his fellow members of Congress. If you are even more enthusiastic about it, I would encourage you to go and do something very simple. Your congressmen are in district offices, at least many of them are in your district offices right now. Go visit the district office and tell them what you think. Let them hear what you think. You may not see the congressman, you might only see a staff person, but the fact is the district offices aren't used to having people come in and talking to them about issues. And whereas the DC office kind of goes, you know, blah, 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 blah. The district office is used to dealing with, you know, cases of Social Security and other problems with the federal government. So they're not as used to dealing with people talking about issues. Your going to the district office will get to the congressman or the congresswoman. It will. It's effective, and you're free to use our tool, getliberty.org. We pay for it. It's a tool we make free for you guys. You're free to use it. Please share it. But go to your district offices. You can just by that simple stop by, you can make a difference in terms of trying to of getting the word to the member about what you are expecting of them. Because don't depend on them to be told by people in DC. You have to be the ones who are communicating with them. So and trust being a big problem. You know, if they don't hear from you, then then they can't say no. If they don't hear from you, then they're not saying no. And so just take the means necessary to try to make sure they hear from you. And certainly our tool that we have up on getliberty.org is one way to be heard. But the best way is to make an appointment at the district office and go there and tell them, maybe only 3 minutes, 5 minutes, just tell them, Joe Biden no longer can be president of the United States. He needs to be impeached. That's the way you feel. Tell them if it's a party thing, tell them that how you feel about the budget or how you feel about issues that the issues that affect your life, because all they hear, they hear from a lot of people in Washington D.C. 200 million people decided to watch Donald Trump last night. Maybe they need to hear from those people. Just a thought. Absolutely. Democrats wouldn't know truth and slap them in the face. If left them moving, they're lying. They're disgraceful. Susan, I hope that's your husband. It's a good-looking guy. But I have to tell you, I've said similar things. One of the philosophical things I'm going to get at right after this, I'm getting a little philosophical, but one of the philosophical questions that we often face is, if you believe that power is ultimately in Washington, D.C. or in government, that it's something that humans can attain, and that's the ultimate goal, is to gain power. And you ascribe, as Mao did, that all power comes from the barrel of a gun. And in this case, meaning controlling the government, and then all power comes from being able to keep others from taking that power from you. And you live and breathe wanting to gain power. That becomes your sole means of existence as an individual. You'll do anything to gain that power, which means you'll lie, you'll cheat, you'll do anything necessary to try to gain power. You'll subvert the laws. You'll weaponize the federal government law enforcement agencies, because the law doesn't matter. What matters is who holds the power, who holds the gun. And if you believe in God, and you believe that, I'm Christian, that Christ died for your sins, and was rose and resurrected, and that through him we can have eternal life. There's a lot more. Truth is truth. Jesus stood before Pontius Pilate, was telling him, "I hold your life in my hands," and he told him, "No, you don't." He told him that Jesus is truth, absolute truth. And Pontius Pilate answered as just as Mao would have answered. What is truth? Because Pontius Pilate believed that truth was that the Roman legions that he commanded determined what truth was, and that there was no absolute truth. And Jesus, who was absolute truth, stood in front of him, told him it was absolute truth, and Pontius Pilate couldn't see it. So I never get upset with people who don't understand, who are not truthful in politics, because if they don't believe that there is absolute truth, they're under no compunction to tell it. I can't hold them to my standards. I have to hold myself to my standards. And I fall short often, too often. But don't get dismayed. The answer is tell them the truth. Expose them to the truth. John, in the book of John, 14:6, Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, the life. Nobody comes to the Father but through the Son. The first words in the book of the John are about the Word. Jesus was the Word. The very Word of God was Jesus. How can you get upset for somebody who's not worrying about truth if they don't recognize the word, or even what truth is? That is far from what I was planning on talking about, and I will end with that. So thank you very much for tuning in. Share if you found it to be valuable, and we do appreciate your support, and just keep fighting on. We'll be back tomorrow with another broadcast. Take care.